America should embrace globalization. And to me, Main Street is not a cliche. I grew up in a small town in central Minnesota. Maxwell and I are Minnesota Twins fans. And this was called Sauk Center. It's a town of 4,000, a one-stop light town. It's actually the birthplace of Sinclair Lewis, who wrote the novel Main Street, that won him the Nobel Prize. I lived 2 blocks from the original Main Street. So I know a thing or two about Main Street. I've spent most of my adult life outside of Washington, 12 years in Colorado Springs, working for the Freedom newspaper there. It owns the Orange County Register, the same company. I was writing libertarian editorials every day that got distributed to 100,000 doorsteps each morning. I spoke to Rotary clubs and school groups, so I think I have an idea of what goes on outside Washington and what people in Washington often contemptuously refer to as flyover country, but what I call home. This book was not written for other trade experts. It was written for people in small towns and farmhouses and cities and suburbs throughout America. We wonder where we're headed in this more open world of ours. You know, Americans are bombarded every day by populists on the left and the right about how trade is destroying our jobs and our industrial base, and we need to raise trade barriers to save America. Well, my goal in writing the book was to expose the many myths out there against trade. And I bring a lot of facts and figures and good charts to bear. But I also wanted to challenge the populists on their own turf. You know, they throw around a lot of bad numbers, but they also go after the heart. I'll give them credit. They talk about values, they talk about emotional appeal and patriotism, and I won't cede 1 inch of that ground to them. So in the book, I try to close the deal by talking about how trade supports our most basic values as Americans, about justice, about compassion, competition, freedom, rule of law, progress, peace. It's all in there. And along the way, in kind of concentric circles, I start talking about consumers and the family, and move out to the workplace, the economy as a whole, and then the broader world. Other books have been written about people coming out of the closet. I start Mad About Trade by going into my closet. And I take an inventory of all the clothes in my closet. And I have to say, I didn't find any skeletons. Some people said you'd sell more books if you had a little bit of sex scandal in there. Well, I do mention Viagra somewhere in the book. But the only scandal in my closet, according to some people, is how few items are made in the United States. In fact, out of 120 shirts and pants and suits and other things I looked at, 10 items were made in the USA, and 9 of those were neckties. I could find 1 shirt made in the USA. Everything else came from China, Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, South Korea, at least 16 other countries. 1 knit shirt had Lou Dobbs' worst nightmare on the label, Hecho en China. The rest of my house is chock full of stuff made abroad. I have a coffee machine made in Mexico, a coffee grinder made in Germany, and then all sorts of stuff from China. Electric tea kettle, a bread machine, folding chairs, 2 laptop computers, 3 basketballs, and I kid you not, a plastic electronic barking guard dog. Now, before you question my patriotism, and I don't think anybody in this room would do this, but try the same experiment. Look in your own wardrobe and see where your stuff is from. And you'll see that we Americans have voted with our dollars every day to participate in the global economy. We can say we think we should buy American, but we don't. At least not on these items. If you go back to the 1960s, if you looked at our imports from the rest of the world, they were the equivalent of about 6% of our GDP. And exports were about 6% of our GDP. Today, exports have almost tripled in terms of relative GDP to 17%. Our imports have almost quadrupled to 22%. That is globalization. And we're more, when you think of it, Americans have, you'd have to basically go back to colonial times to find a time when Americans have spent or earned a higher share of their income in the global economy than we do today. And we're more globalized for three basically very good reasons. One is the rest of the world's been catching up to us in terms of development. There are a lot more people out there who can sell us goods or buy goods from us or be business partners with us. Secondly, since World War II, trade barriers and barriers to international investment have come down here in the United States and abroad, quite dramatically. And third, globalization has been turbocharged by technology. Jet engines, ocean shipping containers, satellite communication, the internet. All these have greatly facilitated the movement of goods, services, ideas, capital, even people. Opponents of globalization shouldn't be mad about trade agreements. They should be mad about technology. That's been driving globalization as much as trade agreements. Well, let me talk a little bit about consumer benefits. This is this concentric circle moving up. And this is completely ignored in Washington. But at the Cato Institute, we talk a lot about the consumer benefits because it is the single biggest payoff from free trade is to Americans as consumers. They are the forgotten special interest in the trade debate. And we shouldn't apologize for talking about consumption. After all, without consumption, we would all be starving, naked, homeless, and quickly dead. Consumption is life itself. And the paychecks and profits that we earn or hope to earn mean nothing unless we can translate them into tangible, usable products. A place to live, a car to drive, clothes, food, a big screen TV, tuition, donations to church or charity. But politicians have nothing but contempt for Americans as consumers. Just listen to the next time a politician talks about trade. This is a nonpartisan book. I criticize President Bush for steel tariffs. I go after, criticize Ron Paul and Duncan Hunter and Byron Dorgan and Warren Buffett and Ralph Nader. But let me pick on our President Obama for a moment. During the 2007 primaries, he was asked by Keith Oberman, I think a very reasonable question. He said, why should an American family struggling to make ends meet have to pay more for an American-made shirt when they could buy something cheaper from another country? And here's what our future president said before a stadium of cheering union members. He said, people don't want a cheaper t-shirt if they're losing a job in the process. They would rather have a job and pay a little bit more for the t-shirt. Lou Dobbs said the same thing in one of his books. I don't think helping American consumers save a few cents on trinkets and t-shirts is worth the loss of American jobs. Well, first, somebody should remind them that virtually all Americans wear t-shirts and hardly any Americans make t-shirts anymore. In fact, if you add up the number of Americans who make clothing of any kind in textiles, it's less than 1/3 of 1% of the workforce. And yet the typical American household is buying 40 shirts a year. A well-paid television personality or Washington politician doesn't care what t-shirts cost, but American families, middle-class, low-income American families do care. In fact, trade is the working family's best friend. We benefit every day from trade basically delivers lower prices, better quality, and more variety. Lower prices. I have one exercise in the book where I look at the change in consumer prices of different items that we buy. And a pattern emerges, startling pattern emerges. Those products that are internationally traded the most, clothing, shoes, some of these other things, consumer electronics, that is where prices have been going up less than inflation, or in many cases going down. But if you look at those products where prices have been going up faster than inflation, they are products that are generally sheltered from global competition. I mean, not because of trade barriers, but just by the nature of them. Think healthcare, college tuition, cable TV, trash collection, movie tickets. It's because there isn't international competition. So trade is delivering